Welcome into this Tuesday edition of Frankly Hockey on Victory Plus. Brian Ray alongside NHL insider Frank Saravalli. Coming up on today's show, it's going down in Ottawa. Playoff implications all over the map tonight on the docket. James Hagens is officially a member of the Bruins organization. We'll talk Anton Frondell with his former teammate Joe Snively, former NHLer as well. But Frank, as I said, jam-packed schedule tonight. There was a lot going on with, 15 games, I think, is what the docket is this evening.
15 games and so many playoff swings on the line. We'll talk about the math and what all of it means as well.
So a lot to get into between the Ottawa situation, the East playoff race. Once again, Anton Frondell, James Hagens, prospects are now becoming a part of their NHL organizations. But let's start things in the West with the Edmonton Oilers. We had the quote from Connor McDavid talking about, the well-oiled machine that's going on the other side of the ice with Tampa in coaching. And now people wonder if he's comparing it to Chris Knoblauch. And hey, Oilers have a little bit of drama going on during a playoff race. I've never seen this happen before at Edmonton. But in terms of what is going on right now, this is probably more indicative of the Oilers situation as a whole. Nobody's happy with their situation, and they can't find a way to get happy right now in this specific playoff division.
Yeah, look, I understand where the frustration comes from. This Oiler team is on track for 89 points. They have gone to 2 consecutive Stanley Cup finals. They're not a sure bet, at least even mathematically, to make the playoffs, although we all expect that to happen with the Pacific Division pillow fight. Leon Draisaitl is in Munich getting treatment for an injury. And all of this is bubbling to the surface at the same exact time that Connor McDavid is still just a few weeks removed from losing in the gold medal game, and him probably feeling like, I'm getting toward the back end of my 20s. My career has been full of $150 million and individual accolades. Hart Trophy, Conn Smythe, leading scorer, leading goal scorer. I mean, he's one of the best players of all time already.
Yeah.
But is missing that team crowning achievement. And so you probably feel like you're in quicksand. And not only that, but it's slipping through your fingers as well, this opportunity to win. And so all of that happens at the same exact time. Someone says, so what about Jon Cooper? And you gush about him, and he walked it back on Monday, but let's be real. Connor McDavid knew exactly what he was saying in the moment in time. He's the second Edmonton Oiler to take a run at Chris Knoblauch, and this one in a much more pointed way than Leon Draisaitl did pre-Olympic break. So here was his quote on Monday where he said, "We're not taking shots. Everybody can be better, myself included. Everybody can be better. It was more just complimentary of a great team in this league that came in and played a good game. Nothing more than that. Not sure how it was taken that way. It wasn't supposed to be that way, but I understand, obviously, I understand how people could look at it that way, but it's not what I was intending to do at all." With all due respect to the best player in the world, I'm calling bullshit. Look, this is a situation where, again, he knew what he was saying. He knows the magnitude and power of his words. He knows that when he speaks, people listen, and not just in the media, but also in that locker room and throughout that organization. And the best way that I can describe this Connor McDavid situation, as we're still talking about it on Tuesday from Saturday night, is that this was an unforced error, Brian. This was unnecessary. This is team that's trying to find its way. And had the Oilers lost on Saturday, as disappointing as it was, we certainly wouldn't have anything to talk about if he was asked about Jon Cooper and just said, hey, he's a good coach, but we've got one of the best coaches in the league here who's taken us to 2 straight Stanley Cup finals.
Sure.
Period. End of story. We never talk about it again. It's never even mentioned. So again, unforced error, didn't need to be there, and then sort of half-heartedly walks it back saying, I understand how you got there, but trust me, we're all not naive enough to think that is what actually was his intended message.
There were 2 things that jumped out to me when I saw really the initial comments and then obviously the reaction from that. Kind of like, yeah, Tampa is still the gold standard, I think, in the NHL when it comes to organizations and coaches and roster construction. And yeah, I know we're a few years removed from the 3 Stanley Cup finals and the back-to-back cups, but Jon Cooper is still there. You've got Kucherov, Point, Hedman, Cirelli, Gord, McDonough. They added Hagel. They added Paul. They added Gensel. Like, that's almost the wrong team to compare any other team to, because that is a unique situation. That is a unicorn operation to have that coach, that many players. Of course they are well rehearsed. They are more rehearsed than anybody in the entire NHL because they have been a cohesive unit for literally a decade, which does not happen in the NHL, at least today's NHL, especially the way coaches get cycled through. So I didn't take that much of the comments. Like, yeah, of course, that's who Tampa is. And on top of all that, you have Vasilevsky waiting back there.
Yeah.
If that well-oiled machine ever breaks down.
It was just so how I was just going to say, it was just so how much he poured it on. Like,
yeah,
very, very, and extremely. And like, he just added all these words to it that made it really clear the point that he was trying to drive home. And again, not trying to make too big a deal out of it, but when the best player in the world who only signed a 2-year extension says these things, it feels to me like a bit of grass is greener syndrome. But I think the important reminder here is that for as well as Jon Cooper might have comported himself at the Olympics coaching Connor McDavid, they still lost. Like, you still got to the precipice, the same place that Chris Knobloch got you, and you have still lost. And I mentioned this on yesterday's show, and I'm not trying to be too critical, but the point here is Connor McDavid should wear some of that. The choice selection in overtime and chance selection, how aggressive he was to try and end it himself, winding up in the first 8 seconds of 3-on-3 OT in the gold medal game. Part of the reason they lost is because of that. So look, everything that he does and says will be magnified, and understandably and rightfully so, particularly as he has earned and used more of his voice. And when he speaks, when the team is struggling as the way that it has, that carries more weight. It just does. And I think he gets it, but that also means that we need to hear it and absorb it, which is to say that, man, this summer is going to be really interesting, particularly if the Edmonton Oilers flame out in the first round, or God forbid, don't make the playoffs. Couple that with Austin Matthews and what he's going through in Toronto, trying to pick through a team that didn't defend him after a gross knee injury. I mean, there's a lot happening here that until these players come out and say, put a stake in the ground, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere.
Sure.
I think what this has done is created more additional speculation about the future of two significant Canadian franchises.
Well, and the second thing for me, and this has always kind of filtered around in the background for me, but when it comes to Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers, there's an added element to everything that is said or done or decided with him, because the Edmonton Oilers are the only team that traded Wayne Gretzky at the height of his powers. I know he ended up going to St. Louis later on, but at the height of his powers. And now here we are decades later, and you have, once again, the greatest player on the planet, possibly universe, if there is a multiverse situation going on. But once again, with the Edmonton Oilers, and I just feel like there's always that little fiber of, well, boy, can we find a way to get a cup out of this guy before he gets moved on again, because we are the organization that moved on from Wayne Gretzky. There's that little social dynamic that I think always filters around, whether it's Edmonton media, the fan base, the organization, the hockey culture around there. And so it's always going to be a little bit different with him. Yes, on top of his status in the NHL and the magnitude of his presence and what he might say, but that adds an extra caveat to everything that is said and done involving Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, and I understand that. I think a totally different situation, given that the Oilers were in financial constraints at the time. Peter Pocklington was
Sure.
looking for cash. I mean, there's a lot of different elements to it. But I think what is similar is this sort of everyone in Edmonton has kind of gone into their shell a little bit here. The fans are highly reactive and the marketplace is highly
Yeah.
reactive to anything even remotely controversial or a strong opinion about Connor McDavid or any criticism levied his way, because they want to be protective, because they understand the fragile nature of this arrangement. And so much of what Edmonton is, breathes, eats, sleeps revolves around the identity of their hockey team. And I get that. I think it's a huge source of pride for Northern Alberta and the surrounding region when you see how much people care. But it also means that on the outside, we still need to have a real conversation about what all of this means and how to unpack it. Because if this were another sport, if this were the NBA or if this were the NFL, this would be talked about all week, not just like
Sure.
Monday and Tuesday. Because I did Edmonton this morning radio and they were kind of like, well, like, aren't you making too big a deal out of this? And I'm like, whoa, hold on a second here. Like, this is, again, the best player in the universe torching his coach, regardless of what he tried to walk back on Monday. And so not making too big a deal out of this. This is headline news. And it just bears in mind watching what happens moving forward as everyone tries to come together again for a playoff run.
That's the thing. And all of this while Edmonton is trying to hold on to their spot in the Pacific Division. And that is a whole different ordeal in itself. It will be fascinating to see how things move forward in Edmonton here. We're going to stay north of the border. If we're talking about fragile situations, it's a totally different kind of fragile situation in Ottawa, because here they are making their push. They get within 2 points of the wild card spot last night. And for me, their defense has been the driving force behind it. And then, two blue liners essentially go down. So you have this overwhelming positivity of closing in on a wild card spot, and then bang, you get a Tommy Boy 2x4 across the face.
Oh.
And now Ottawa has to figure out what to do. Yeah, there's the cross check on the arm of Chabot. But now Ottawa has to figure out, how do we navigate this in what is going to be a grueling schedule coming down the stretch here for them?
Oh, man. The Tommy Boy, not so much here. Not so much here, but right here. And man,
oh my God, what happened to your face?
Yeah, unfortunate for Thomas Chabot, who Bruce Garriock reporting on this Tuesday that surgery has not been ruled out for Chabot, who has had some wrist issues previously. And I know Sens fans were not happy with JT Miller, and understandably so. But you look at this blue line and taking out two of their top five defensemen and add in, Nick Jensen, who is a stalwart back there, you're really in a tough spot. So they've tried Dennis Gilbert. They tried Lassi Thomson. He, of course, left the game. Thomson also going to be out a while, according to Travis Green. And enter today Carter Yakimchuk and Jorian Donovan. So
who?
Look, yeah, that's a fair question. Yakimchuk is a really, really talented player. And we'll get a view of Yakimchuk and his abilities. But point being, you're down to a mash unit on your blue line. This team has extended far into its depth, way further than they planned on, particularly in a playoff race. And that's what made last night's effort so impressive. I saw Ranger fans tweeting at me when I said, hey, gutty effort for the Sens last night on the road at Madison Square Garden, losing two defensemen so early in the game, having to finish with four, and not the ideal four. And Ranger fans are going, yeah, but we shot ourselves in the foot. Franchise record tying 9 shots. They added one today to make it 10, so it doesn't tie the record. But nonetheless, that was because of the way that the Sens played in part, not just the Rangers' futility. So I think the Sens deserve a ton of credit for their gumption, but it ain't going to get any easier tonight, playing back-to-back, traveling from New York to Detroit to take on a Red Wing team that's just as desperate, vying for the same spot that you are in the standings.
8-2-1 in March for the Sens, and in terms of public data and analytics, they're basically top 5 or top 7 in key defensive metrics. It's been done with defense, but you mentioned the game they have to play tonight on the back-to-back. I mean, they have Detroit, Pittsburgh, Tampa twice, Buffalo, Minnesota, Carolina, and the Islanders amongst the teams they're going to play between now and the end of the regular season. Some of those home, some of those on the road, but I mean, that is a massive schedule to go through with a healthy complement of defensemen, let alone down your 2 best defensemen. They're going to have to figure out how to defend without those guys. But now do you have to score your way into a wild card situation? You're going to need a goaltending performance unlike any other to get yourself into a wild card situation. I just wonder what happens to their actual defensive play with those 2 guys out of the lineup. Team game, everybody defends, but those 2 guys are massive holes on the blue line.
Well, can we also give a little love to James Reimer, 7-year-old, signed off the scrap heap this year as the Sens are looking for some form of goaltending support, and they get it from a guy that was kind of a forgotten man for the first part of this season. Like, they reached deep to sign him. All these other guys couldn't do the job, and now you've got Reimer in net and hoping that Linus Ullmark, who I mentioned before the Olympic break or right at the Olympic break, what is one team that could make a run? It was the Sens because of how well they had played in spite of their 32nd place save percentage goaltending. Positive goal differential, all those things had lined up in their favor. We're starting to see some of that come alive because in part, their goaltending has been much better.
And as you said, tonight they've got another big matchup. So what will things look like on that Ottawa blue line, and how will they play? Once again, 2 points out of the last wild card spot in the East, and it sets up one of a number of games that are going to have massive implications going on tonight. We were talking about the full docket here, but the playoff implications that are floating out there. And I think at this point, we're all really looking at the East because of all the teams that are still stacked together. There's the pillow fight division in terms of the Pacific, but in terms of what a regulation win could do for playoff odds versus a regulation loss, here's the layout here. And you have Columbus taking on Philly. Pittsburgh has to deal with Colorado. You mentioned Ottawa and Detroit. Those are some big-time situations going on in the Eastern Conference when you look at this board.
This board is incredible, and props awesome to Mika, Blake McCurdy. You know him as Ineffective Math on Twitter or X. He runs hockeyviz.com, which is where this data comes from. And the amazing part about looking at this is really how many 20-point swings there are based on regulation wins and losses. Now, there may be some 3-point games that are thrown in here, but point being, this is a really easy way to digest how significant getting a regulation win or loss tonight will be for some of these teams' chances. Boston, 75% in or 55% in. Ottawa, 79% in or 54% in. Columbus, 80 or 60. These are massive, massive swings potentially either way. The Flyers can essentially be eliminated. The Pittsburgh Penguins can kind of more or less clinch with a regulation win, getting up to 92%. And part of it is you have to start with Micah's model, which, interestingly enough, like it says that the Sens are a 69% shot, even though today they're on the outside looking in. And I think you have to drill down on, and we'll hit this board for the next few shows, or really until these standings are crystallized. When you look at the standings, you would look at this and say, well, Ottawa has a couple teams to jump. Why do they have a better shot than Boston? It goes and looks back at the last 20 games, and it really dives into the analytics and also their future schedule and predicts and models out what the potential wins and losses are, starting with this first game. So it's really detailed and interesting to think about, but I think it just perfectly contextualizes what tonight's games mean particularly in the East, as we mentioned, is a lot more fluid than the West.
Well, and a team like Ottawa, we were just talking about the injury situation. I was actually surprised to see that 69% number, just given the schedule they have moving forward that I was talking about earlier. But yeah, it is going to be just a ton of fun. This has been a lot of fun in the East, and we were kind of joking about it could not make up its mind for the first 3 months, 4 months of the season. It still can't make up its mind, honestly. When you look at everybody in here. But that is what's turned this end of March into April into a lot of fun. But then you look at the Western Conference side of things and those potential implications and those teams that are trying to fight for things like I think Anaheim's going to win the Pacific. I think they have enough runway there. Utah looks like they're ready to get in, but Vegas, LA, Edmonton, Nashville is so strange. They keep winning and they keep defying expectations for a team that once again was sellers at the deadline. Not as congested as the East, but I do think there's some compelling looks here on that last wild card spot and then how the 3 seeds at the top of the Pacific actually shake out.
I couldn't agree more. And I think the math again and the modeling and the analytics get really interesting. You would look at the standings today and you would say Nashville should have a way better chance to get in than the LA Kings. And there's a significant disparity here. I mean, the Kings are on the outside looking in. They've been getting mashed in the face with some memory foam. If you're talking about a pillow fight, they are honestly, it's a surprise how poor they've been given the opportunity. I know there's been injuries. But what's in front of them, they've had so many different chances to really dive in and really cement a spot in the playoffs and in the standings. And they repeatedly haven't done it. They've passed up that opportunity, just as San Jose and Seattle have as well. Nashville comes in, they're in the playoffs by not a sizable points percentage or points, but to see LA based on that model potentially getting to 77% tonight, and Nashville is still trying to scratch and claw to get above 50, it kind of just tells you that there's an undercurrent working against the Preds, and it also has to do with expected strengths and weaknesses, but that really the door is still wide open for the LA Kings, which I was pretty surprised to see.
That and even just Seattle still hanging around. Like they have to go to Florida, but it's almost they're in last stand mode on this one.
Yep.
But also getting back to the whole Pacific Division thing, and I wanted to ask you this before we were coming on. I can't remember a season where an entire division of hockey would miss the playoffs entirely in the other conference. There's always been seasons where one division is down or most of the teams are down, but it feels like at least the team leading that division would be somewhere in the playoff picture on the other side of the league. I can't remember a season like this where an entire division, one to the bottom, would completely miss the playoffs in the other conference. Can you?
Yeah, I think you'd have to go back to the South Least days. There's a reason why it earned that nickname, like somewhere in that 2005 to 2013 range. Like there had to have been a year in there where it was pretty close. Like some of those South Least teams were kind of like in the low to mid 80s in terms of points. I don't know if it's quite as pronounced as
I always felt like the leader would have caught the last spot.
Yeah, I think the math today is if you took every team from the Pacific and plopped them in the East, every single one of them would be out by 4 or more points.
Just checked. Yep.
So, I mean, that is
how does that happen?
Look, but here's the amazing part is the strength, or I guess you could frame it as the weakness of one division. That sort of waffles year and year between conference. It's not always the West or it's not always the East where there's this disparity on display. And speaking of the East, that also is part of what makes this Columbus chase so much more interesting is that they could catch 2 or 3 in the Metro as opposed to like Boston, Detroit. I mean, I guess the Islanders would be in the same spot as the Blue Jackets. there's not as much wiggle room for Boston and Detroit or Ottawa. You'd have to gun down one of the wild card teams.
Yes. Yeah. It is. I think Columbus is going to get there. I think they're going to pass Pittsburgh, especially looking at tonight. You know, Pittsburgh has to deal with Colorado. Now, they just smoked Colorado, what last week when they had that 7-goal outburst. But, there's going to be an opening here where I actually think Columbus is going to get Pittsburgh, and they're going to have home ice advantage in that number 2 hole.
Home ice would be amazing considering where they were.
Yeah,
we apologized to Blue Jackets fans on Friday and told them, hey, I'm sorry, I did not see this borderline miraculous run coming from bottom to home ice.
Well, let's stay in the Eastern Conference. It's unfortunate the Florida Panthers not going to be a part of this playoff picture, most likely, and not a chance to go for that three-peat. But Paul Maurice, their head coach, set to hit 2,000 games. He'd be the second guy in NHL history to do that. Obviously, a credit to what he's been able to do in his career. There's the board right there. We're going to have a couple of guys hit the 2K mark coming up here in the next year or so. But Paul Maurice is the next man to do that. And I love that he's also doing it we've had so many great one-liners from press conferences from him. You know, there's a little personality with Paul Maurice getting to this 2,000 game mark, which is going to be fun to see.
There always is. And I think when you consider the totality of his career, first off, it's amazing. And you look at this resume, and he touched on this in his press conference yesterday when he said, I saw some of the tape and just like how he said, quote, how young and unprepared I was, like how many things you don't know then that you wish you did. And it's amazing how young he was when he took over. He's still just 59 and recently turned 59. Like the next guys on that list behind him, Lindy Ruff isn't a guarantee to keep coaching. This is the last year of his contract. And as exciting as the Sabres have been, there's no guarantee that he gets to 2,000. Joel Quenneville still has a couple years to get to 2,000. I'd expect that he does, but it's not a guarantee. And Barry Trotz has already hung up his coaching whistle. Yeah. So look, it's an incredible accomplishment. And I just think of all the different moments along the way, whether it was him going to Russia to coach in the KHL or him joining us at TSN to work on the panel. How many different moments that Paul Maurice had to really not be in this spot. I mean, before he landed in Florida, I can remember talking to him while he was sitting on the dock and contemplating what happens next. And his thought process was, I'm only going to dive back in. Life is really good. I'm only going to dive back in if I have an opportunity with something truly special. And no one ever really envisions getting gifted a President's Trophy win. I mean, Joel Quenneville has to step aside after 8 games. And then Andrew Brunette does a great job closing out that season. And they made a coaching change. How often would something like that happen to then have these special players in Florida come together with some great moves by your general manager to win back-to-back Stanley Cups after not winning at all? It's a really incredible journey and path. And I know that he probably wasn't in the mood to talk about it yesterday, but is grateful today for everything that's happened along the way, the trials, the tribulations, and it just makes the successes that much sweeter.
And that situation in Florida, he got pulled in there as a guy who had not won a Stanley Cup yet. So they put their faith in him, and obviously it's been a special situation going on down in Florida. Question for you. Let's assume Lindy Ruff and Joel Quenneville are going to get there. They're going to hit the 2,000 game mark. Does anybody else ever do it? Because I look at the coaching culture around the NHL today and how quickly coaches get cycled through, and we're seeing less and less tenure. Who else could do it? The next 2 guys on the list essentially are Jon Cooper and Todd McClellan. They're both 56, 57, and they're nowhere close to that mark. They each would need like 9, 10, 11, 12 seasons, I think, to get there. Do either of those guys do it? Do we have another 2,000 game coach after Joel Quenneville and Lindy Ruff, assuming they get there?
So if you want a great data point and you asked about Jon Cooper is at 1,030 games coached, and
Yeah.
Jon Cooper and Paul Maurice are within 6 months of each other in age, and they're 970 games apart. You're right. I mean, it's entirely
I don't know
possible.
if it'll ever happen again.
I mean, someone will have gotten a good start, and really coached from. I mean, like that, you have to have started in your early to mid 30s, and I don't know who else would really be in that. Sheldon Keefe started at 39.
How old was Ryan Warsofsky when he got the job in San Jose?
Let's see.
He was in his early to mid 30s, wasn't he? Or is in his early to mid 30s. I say this like he's been there for 14 years, and he's
150 games in, and he's 38. So, I mean, possible.
Yeah.
But again, you got to have a load of success, get a second, third, fourth, fifth crack. I mean, Paul Maurice went back to the same franchise before. Like that's like there has been some really, I mean, again, and missed time in the KHL, missed time on the panel at TSN, sat on his dock for a while, like, and he still got to 2,000.
Yep. I don't know if it'll ever happen again after those other three with Quenneville and Lindy Ruff, maybe Cooper, maybe Todd McClellan. But I also just think the culture of bringing in a fresh young voice, bringing in the fresh new voice, it's no longer the coaching recycling bin that we used to see in past years where a guy could go from team to team to team. Sometimes if after that second or third job, you may have to go be an assistant for a while or and that's where I think it's going to break up the runs for some coaches to try and hit that 2K mark somewhere down the line, just the way the hiring culture is now in the NHL. But this may be it. I mean, after Ruff and Quenneville, we may not have another 2,000 game coach in the NHL again.
I'm with you. Math would suggest that it's a very distinct statistic possibility that we don't.
Yes. Well, Paul Maurice is about to coach his 2,000th game. James Hagens is about to play his first AHL game. That's where we're at as the Bruins prospect signed the ATO. He's going to go join the American Hockey League's Providence Bruins. He will not be a part of the NHL lineup. First-round pick last summer, 7th overall. And Frank, I'm biased. I worked in the American Hockey League for 4 years. I loved that league. I saw a lot of great players come through that league. I like the development model that the American Hockey League provides. I actually think this is a fantastic move for the Bruins to do. I know they're in a playoff chase. I know they want to bolster their lineup every way they can. But if this is your guy, if this is your centerpiece or one of your centerpieces that you're hoping for the next 10, 12, 15 years, you want to get that development path started correctly. And I actually think the American Hockey League is the perfect spot for him to land right now.
So there's a lot happening here. First off, there's a CBA function, which is you can't go play in the American Hockey League after the trade deadline. You can't sign a new NHL deal and get sent down. That's not how it works. So the only opportunity, if the Boston Bruins wanted James Hagens to go play in the AHL, is to sign this amateur tryout agreement and send him to Providence. So he's not getting paid. He actually, in an interesting turn of events, which is not going to matter, still technically will retain his eligibility to play in the NCAA at the end of the season, provided that he doesn't sign an NHL deal. But the fun part about doing it this way, and I do believe the Bruins in their organization have a sort of pecking order from Patrice Bergeron to David Pasternak to Charlie McAvoy. They don't really just send guys right into the NHL. Kind of everyone gets a little bit of a taste in Providence along the lines of what you're talking about, of experiencing that and getting adjusted to pro hockey and the differences. But the fun part about this situation with James Hagens is that he's on this tryout agreement, and at any point during this stretch, they can sign him to that NHL deal, and then he can jump up and play in the NHL. But once that happens this season, at least, can't go back to the AHL. So they want to
Yeah.
monitor this. They want to get him experience playing pro hockey. And then at some point, theoretically, if they can need him, burn the year. And with that, there's pluses and minuses for both player and team. For the player, you get a little bit of money in your pocket right away. You get that signing bonus check and it feels good. But there's also a risk on the back end of it that when your deal expires, if you do burn the first year of that contract, that at the expiration of it, you are a 10-2C player, meaning you do not have arbitration rights. You do not have offer sheet rights. So there's a lot to weigh on both ends of this. And the reason why I like the Bruins taking their time and being patient with this is they haven't closed any avenues off. All they've done is put him in the AHL for the time being, and you can still evaluate over the next few next few weeks here, what happens next for James Hagens, who's such an exciting young centerpiece part of what the Bruins are building for.
It's the classic cliche that GMs love to use, but really let the player make the decision for you. If he goes down to the American League and just dominates, and he's going to be on their top line, or he's going to be in their top six, he's going to play a ton of minutes down there. But if he just absolutely dominates and shows you, okay, he doesn't need to be there anymore, let's get him up here. Player made the decision for you. If he has a bit of a slow start to, I'm going to say his pro career, even though he signed an amateur tryout agreement, which these get signed all the time at the end of the AHL season with different teams. But if he has a bit of a slow start, Providence already in the Calder Cup playoffs. So he's going to have regular season games. They're probably going to be through the first round into the second round. I know the AHL has a play-in round. I'm not counting that. I'm counting the actual true playoff bracket. So he's going to have regular season games, high leverage, high level, high intensity playoff games that he's going to be dealing with right off the hop. You know, there are a lot of GMs that feel this is a bit of a jump start or a kick start to a player's long-term development path, as opposed to having to do this at 18 or 19 years old at the NHL level. So I really do think it falls back on the player will decide for the Bruins what the best course of action is. If he dominates and eats that league alive, made the decision for you. If he has a bit of a slow adjustment period, he's making the decision for you that there's no need to rush it and there's no need to burn the first year of that entry-level contract. So that goes back to why I think this is just a perfect maneuver by the Bruins, not just from a logistics and administrative side, but from a player development side. I think it's the best first step for James Hagens.
I'd be surprised if he's not in the NHL this season. They could really use a third line left wing with some size, get his feet wet. He's a future center. Get him to experience that and head into the summer knowing what to expect. So I think he's really close. And the Bruins have bought themselves some time, to your point.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens with James Hagens and where exactly he finishes this season when it's all said and done. He's one prospect that has joined his NHL organization. Anton Frondell is going to be joining the Chicago Blackhawks here. Looks like he's set to make his NHL debut. And that brings us to our guest, his former teammate over in Sweden, Joe Snively, former NHLer himself. Joe, we're going to ask you a ton about Anton Frondell, but since you're on with us, and we're glad to have you, we had to queue up your first two NHL goals, man. You had a heck of a debut yourself in the National Hockey League. We're going to make you watch it. We're going to throw it up there. We're going to make you watch it. We want to take you down memory lane.
You're embarrassing me. Happy to be on. Looking forward to this.
It's the juicy rebound to lead it off here, Frank.
Oh, yeah. Look what I found. Just a gimme.
Yeah, Joe, walk us through this. What are you thinking looking back at this?
Oh, that must have been maybe 4 years ago. That was a great night. I wish there were fans in the stadium. It was during COVID, but yeah, that was an amazing year. Got my first taste in the NHL. Had my cup of coffee. It was a dream come true. So looking back on it, I couldn't be more grateful for the organization in Washington. They took such great care of me. So.
Yeah, just thinking back, Joe, to how odd of a time it was with no one in the building and to experience like such a high like that, but to not have the goal pop of a Bell Center exploding. Like, what was it like kind of, playing through that?
Yeah, honestly, looking back at you wish it was like that, but in the moment, you're just, as a player, you're just so happy to get that first goal. Like, I could just feel, it felt like a weight off my shoulders, and you could see me with Van Riemsdyk and Wilson. They were just so happy for me too. And we had a great team that year. And then, like I said, it was a dream come true. Played for my hometown team.
No
I'm
doubt.
wondering, when a player scores his first NHL goal, he gets the puck. Did you get both pucks? Because you had two.
I think I got one puck that night. Yeah. Funny story. I was out for the empty netter too, and I forgot what D-man on Montreal was pinching down on me, and I gave it to Wilson. He scored. He goes, "Shoot that puck every time." He was giving me a little bit of grief, but that was a night I'll never forget for sure.
That's awesome. Joe, what's on tap tonight is a night that Anton Frondell won't forget. On Long Island, expected to make his debut for the Hawks, number 3 overall pick. You had a chance to play with him this year in Djurgården. What stands out? What's the first thing you think of when you watched Anton Frondell play this season?
I'll talk about him as a player and as a person, but as a player first, he can score anyway. Shooting, tipping, go to the hard areas. He's got an elite shot, and for how big he is, he moves so well and he's so strong. So he's so young. It was so impressive to be around this year in the weight room, how strong he is in the weight room, in practice, his love for the game, and just see his growth as the season went on. How good he got, and his development curve so steep. So, and as a person and as a young man, he's amazing. He loves the game. He's a great teammate. He loved Djurgården, the club, and I mean, if I'm a Blackhawks fan, I'm so excited for him to be joining. So, I think he's going to score a lot of goals for the Chicago Blackhawks. That's my thoughts.
Joe, we were just talking about James Hagens and him joining Providence on an ATO. We're talking with you on Anton Frondell, and every development path, it's not linear. It's different for every player.
Yeah.
But is there something for an 18-year-old kid to be playing in the Swedish Hockey League with 30-year-old players, and not just playing against them, but being with them in the locker room, because those are two totally different walks of life outside of hockey? Is there something there that better prepares a player to transition to the NHL, where it's a similar locker room setup in terms of dynamics and older players and different lifestyles?
Yeah, I'd say so. And I mean, I played a lot in the AHL, and you had the veteran rule, where only 6 veterans could play a night. Here, there's no veteran rule. It's almost, I don't know the average age of every team, but I think it's an older league. And yeah, every development curve is different for these players, but I am so impressed with him this year, putting up 20 goals, leading our team, one of the top goal scorers in the league. And as an 18-year-old, after first year of being drafted, it's really incredible, and sky's the limit for him. I mean, times in practice, times in games, he pulls moves out. The way he shoots the puck is really, really impressive. He's a special player.
So, Joe, having played in the NHL yourself, did he pick your brain at all? Was he curious about what the NHL is like or how it works? How do you think he managed the pressure of having a lot of eyeballs and focus on him, stepping into that league as an 18-year-old and being as productive as he was?
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit. I think he has some better outlets here with Marcus Kruger, who won a couple cups with Chicago. So I think he got most of his advice from him. But he kind of asked me about the how it is, the landscape in North America, the NHL, the AHL, and yeah, I think being a third overall pick and scoring 20 goals now, he has some pressure on him. But he's the guy he's just, like I said, his character. It's so great. He loves the game. He's out there on the ice so long after practice. Before games, he's squatting 150 kilos on his back. I'm sitting there rolling out like, this guy's amazing. Like he's a beast. So I mean, I can't speak to how maybe it'll come out tonight and maybe he'll score a hat trick, but eventually he's going to score a lot of goals, in my opinion.
Huh. And how did you adjust, Joe, to playing in Sweden? Obviously, you mentioned your NHL and AHL experience and spent a long time growing up here, playing here, to then go there and different style of hockey. What do you think the adjustment level is going to be like for him coming this way?
Yeah, I think in general, if he's playing in the NHL, there's 30 more games a season. So I think sometimes you play back-to-backs, you're traveling. I think managing the workload might be something that'll be different for him. Because here we don't play back-to-backs. Play Thursday, Saturday, maybe play Tuesday every now and then. So the games here, I almost feel like I'm back in college. The games are so intense. They mean so much more. And I feel like, with more games, that workload, it might be something new for him. I think that's something college players experience too. Yeah.
Joe, you're talking about obviously how great Frondell has been over there, and there's obviously a lot of expectations, and there should be when you have his talent. But you've done this at every level. What's he going to struggle with, or what does he need to be ready for? It's never a perfect transition. There's always a little learning curve here and there. So let's go to the other side of it. What does he need to be ready for? Maybe what does he need to prepare himself for that maybe a bit of a shell shock or just not expected to deal with here on the ice?
It's hard to say. I'd just say there are some elite players in the NHL. I think that's every player is just highly skilled. So, that's something he's going to have to learn, defending certain players, having a smart stick, things like that. I think that's probably the biggest thing. The difference between at least the SHL and the NHL is just the overall average skill of every player up and down the lineup. Yeah,
no doubt. Joe, last one for me. We talked about your transition to play in Sweden. What's next for you? How long do you want to keep playing? You've got a Yale degree in your back pocket. Tell us about your journey and what's next for Joe Snively?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to sign a 2-year extension with Djurgården, so I'll be in Stockholm for another 2 more seasons. I'm on the streets right now. I love living here. For me, it's great. You play 52 games in the season, no back-to-backs. It's been much easier on my body, my hips. It's more skating, not as physical. So, as a smaller guy, I think it suits me a little better. And I'm signing off for another 2 years, and after that, I'll have to decide what's next.
Joe, it's interesting hearing you talk about that, and this is the last one for me, too. I feel like players in your situation have a really interesting perspective to give. There's always the NHL dream, and that's what every player is fighting for. But not everybody gets to live that dream. You did, but you also have this whole other side of professional hockey where outside of the NHL, you're over in Sweden. It's the KHL. It's the American League. But there's a lot of different avenues for players to have really long, productive hockey careers. And I feel like you're a classic example of that outside of the NHL. It really is fascinating, some of the journeys that you and other players in your situation go on.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I still love the game. And there's so many guys out there that love the game, and you can make a good living playing in other leagues out in the NHL. So this summer I was kind of in between, maybe playing the AHL again or finding a new challenge. And this opportunity came across, and I took it right away. So it's a great experience. Get to travel, live in a new country, experience different cultures. It's great.
Joe, we really appreciate it, man. Thanks for the insight on Anton Frondell. And listen, best of luck the rest of the year and best of luck the next 2 seasons over there, man.
Appreciate it. Yeah, happy to be on.
See you, Joe.
That is Joe Snively, former NHLer, currently playing in the Swedish Hockey League. And Frank, like I said, I'm a product of the American Hockey League. I nerd out for players like that because you really can have great careers in terms of making a healthy living and doing something you really enjoy outside of the NHL and outside of the American League. And he is a prime example of that, signing on for another 2 years over there.
I love to see it. And like I said, so awesome having a a Yale degree in your back pocket to,
Yeah,
hey,
just
whenever you
casual
decide,
Yale degree.
yeah, maybe hey, at 35, 37, whatever it is, maybe he wants to be a coach someday. Maybe he wants to be an agent or be a million different things. The world's your oyster. And so there are a ton of different paths to consider. And so love to see Joe excelling in his next career and kind of put up very similar numbers to Anton Frondell this season in Djurgården. So love to see that. And thanks to Joe for joining us. Just a quick note on the Blackhawks morning skate. Anton Frondell on Connor Bedard's wing, which is a nice, interesting development to start, and also on PP1. So they're not just easing him in here. This is all gas, no brakes, NHL debut. Welcome to the National.
Baptism by fire, my friend, and I think we're all excited to see how Anton Frondell looks, not just at his debut, but really what does the rest of this regular season look like for him with the Blackhawks. We're going to move things into our Ask the Insider segment. Frank, what's the YouTube chat got for us today?
Yeah, so a lot of people were asking, is Frondell in the lineup today? That is the expectation. Someone, I love this comment from Desert Lab 22, said Paul Maurice ... an overnight success 20 years in the making. Like, isn't that true? When we were talking about his 2,000 game milestone and just the incredible path that he's had getting to this point. Let's see. Scrolling through here, I got so excited talking to Joe that I missed checking this one is from McDoust. He says, any thoughts on the Oilers adding Pete DeBoer? Seems like an off-season move to me. Look, I don't think the Oilers are making a coaching change. And for every person that said, hey, the New Jersey Devils did it with a handful of games left in the season, and they went on to win the Stanley Cup. If Larry Robinson can do it for Lou Lamoriello, then anyone could step in and be successful. I don't think that's in the cards. I don't, as tempting as it might be to have someone of Pete DeBoer's stature standing there after how many Western Conference Finals in a row? Was it 6?
Yep. He had the
Between
3 with
Vegas
Dallas.
and Edmonton, or
Yeah,
5 out of
and then
6?
he had
Vegas and Dallas?
Yeah, I think it was 5 out of 6. I think you're right.
I mean, as tempting as that might be, I don't think that's the plan.
It's the offseason for the Edmonton Oilers is going to be a totally different soap opera to watch and whatever happens there. So we appreciate the questions in the YouTube chat. Make sure you keep those coming every day. But let's go to #Hockey Frank. Let's have some social media fun. Now, I'm curious here. We have Matthew Tkachuk meeting Tiger Woods with the gold medal. Who's more excited? Matthew Tkachuk, because hockey players love golf, getting to meet arguably the greatest golfer on the planet historically, or Tiger Woods, who's like, let me see the medal. Come on, man. I want to hold this thing.
I think it was Matthew, but as cool as that
Tough
is,
to tell.
It's a really cool interaction to see how excited Tiger Woods is to hold it. He's like, man, this thing's heavy. Like,
yeah,
that was like, sometimes you meet someone of that aura or stature, and like, as excited as you are, they're obviously just like, hey, it's a hockey player with a gold medal, like whatever. I'm Tiger Woods. I'm one of the greatest athletes of all time. Like, not at all was that reaction. So you're right. Pretty cool moment for Matthew getting to go up to Palm Beach Gardens and see the TGL finals, and Tiger Woods apparently back in action tonight after sitting out the season. So pretty cool moment.
See, when I see things like that, in the video is so short, we see Matthew Tkachuk, he's shaking somebody else's hand, he's posing with the gold medal. What I want to know is, what was the conversation after? Like, did you ask for swing tips? Did you give Tiger swing tips? Like, what did you chat about golf-wise with Tiger Woods? That's what I want to know from Matthew Tkachuk, because he asked him something. He had to have asked him something to make his golf game better.
But like, I would be so embarrassed to do that. Like, why should Tiger Woods spend a minute talking about golf or my game with me? Like, golf is so individualized. Everyone's so different. I don't know. I feel like that would be a tough one to, like, you have 30 seconds or a minute or however much time he has. I did peep Matthew Tkachuk, though, wearing Tiger Woods brand. He had the Sunday red on. So that was pretty cool, too. It's not
All I'm
like
saying is, if I'm Matthew Tkachuk and my gold medal gets me a chance to meet Tiger Woods, I'm making the most of it. I may never meet him again. And if Tiger doesn't want me to ask him for golf tips, don't be one of the greatest golf players in the history of the sport. That's all I'm saying.
No, true. It would be like the inverse, though. It would be like if Tiger went up to Matthew and was like, so how do you skate? Like, you know what I mean? Like, where do you even start having that conversation? It's just, I don't know. But when I mentioned that thing about Matthew Tkachuk wearing the Sunday red, it actually got me thinking of a really funny flex, like an inadvertent one. I had Hurricanes owner Tom Dundon on my podcast a year or two ago, and I just sat down to do the interview. I was wearing a quarter zip, and it was Travis Matthew was the brand. And he's like, he's like, nice shirt. I'm like, yeah, thanks. Like, I didn't think anything of it. He goes, yeah, I own it. I'm like, what? He's like, no, yeah, like I own Travis Matthew. Like, he's like, did you wear that on purpose? I was like, dude, I had no idea. I just like the shirt. Like, pretty awesome.
You should have been like, no, I got a discount at TJ Maxx.
Oh man,
should have gone back at him. Right. Well,
I was so shocked. I did not have anything in my holster because we were off camera just chit chatting before we started recording. Sure. And I was like, dude, I did not see that coming.
I have a Travis Matthew pullover, and now I'm never going to forget that Tom Dundon owns that brand. So here's something I learned today. But really cool for Matthew Tkachuk and Tiger Woods. That was a really cool interaction. Frank, let's get your money play of the night. We got 15 games going on. You have a full menu of things to choose from. What are you playing here for us?
Yeah, it's interesting this slate tonight because there's a lot of games that there's one team in and one team out and doesn't really mean as much for the other, or a team is kind of locked in, and that makes the spreads really pretty lopsided. So this time of year is a lot different than October or November or a normal slate. I think it's actually a bit harder to do it now. Maybe that's why I had lost a handful going back to last week. But for a lot of the reasons that we mentioned with the Ottawa Senators and their defense being just absolutely pummeled by injury, I'm going with the Detroit Red Wings tonight on the money line. There's not a big spread here. This is pretty close to a coin flip. We know the Red Wings have been injured themselves. This game means a ton for them as well to try and keep their place or to make up ground in the standings. They're trying to ward off a team like Ottawa. So going head to head makes this an especially juicy game, but also for the Sens, it's not just the injury or injuries, I should say, to their back end. It's also about the fact that they're playing back-to-back with travel. So because there's a small spread, I'm going to basically say there's a coin flip odds-wise between Sens and Red Wings. And for a lot of those reasons, I'm going with the Wings.
We will see if the Wings pull this one out tonight against the beleaguered Ottawa Senators in that second night of a back-to-back. That brings us to our final topic, the last word on this one. And Frank, before I tee it off to you, as nutty as the last, I'll say, 2 years have been with the New York Rangers, and Mika Zibanejad's name gets thrown around in a lot of different contexts, when a player reaches 1,000 NHL games in his career, you absolutely have to tip your cap because that is so difficult to do.
It is, and he deserves a ton of credit. I think also what's really clear with a night like this is how much everyone in the Rangers organization and his teammates really appreciate him and his personality. So you saw this before the game. They all come in wearing long wigs to commemorate Mika night at the Garden and him hitting 1,000 games, the special silver stick milestone. And love when you get to see family on the ice. You see his daughter there wearing the 1,000 game sweatshirt and how excited his family is for this. But love the touch from the New York Rangers as well, as they got her a mini silver stick.
Yeah, that's the best part.
To go along as part of the celebration. So really cool night for Mika Zibanejad. And I think one of the fun things thinking about Zibanejad, his journey with 1,000 games and the fact that he hit it last night, the interesting thing is Adam Larson tonight for the Seattle Kraken These two guys were taken not very far apart from each other, 4th and 6th in the draft. And Larson is playing 1,000 tonight for the Kraken. So they both hit it at the same exact time, speaks to their durability, their value in the league. And to nail those on back-to-back nights is pretty cool for the 4th and 6th picks.
Congrats to Mika Zibanejad, and just so his daughter knows, that's not a mini stick, silver stick. You cannot play around and start smacking pucks with that thing. It's got to stay on display. But that was a really nice touch from the New York Rangers. That is going to close up today's edition of Frankly Hockey. John Buccigross back with you guys tomorrow, and as always, Monday through Friday, noon Eastern, 11 Central is when you can catch Frankly Hockey right here on Victory Plus.